Well, let's talk now about international trade. You would have seen the Minister of Agriculture and leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, saying just 20 minutes ago that the coalition government does want to review some of its trading relationships with our major partners. In particular, he and I were talking about the situation in the United States and our new ambassador there, Ibrahim Rasool. There have been other reports this morning that members of the coalition government do want to review some of the ways in which we trade with our major partners, including China, the European Union, and the US. Thina Nodada is the Managing Director at Waymaker Trade Solutions. Thina, good morning to you and thank you so much for your time. If we want to renegotiate our trading relationships with these countries, how do we go about it? Obviously, you have to knock on their door and see if they'll take a meeting first.
Dear Stephen, thank you for having me. Always great to chat to you guys. On my side, there's a number of different ways that can be done, Stephen, and a number of things that are being pushed by our government and the GNU. But the best way to do it is to use opportunities when we have missions, when we have inward missions. So this is something that regularly happens, where we have engagements with guys from the European markets. We've had guys from Ethiopia here with us last week through this SMME Chamber of Commerce. So it's through outward missions, understanding what the needs are in the other countries and what the trade barriers really are. It's all good and well for the government to go out and have these engagements, but it requires a bit of private sector's involvement as well to show their expertise, as they are the ones who are on the ground. So from my perspective, there's a lot of different conferences that take place. You've seen when the BRICS conference that took place in South Africa, where we have some of our own business people showcasing their products and their services, and a lot of MOUs being signed. And these MOUs get signed, but we tend to not see any major improvement in terms of trade when we look at the statistics. And this is something that's been going on for a long time. I know that the BRICS nations are ones that everybody seems to look at very closely to want to see what's happening since BRICS has been around for some time. But when you actually really look at it and you look at our trade with Brazil, Russia, Brazil and Russia don't appear even in our top 25 export trading partners. China is still our #1 trading partner, and then India we've seen be sort of more stagnant, going from about $4 to $5 million going from about $4 to $5 billion of imports from South Africa. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there could be all sorts of reasons for that. I'm going to try and put this as carefully as I can, but the people in government who've largely come from the ANC over the years may want to work with China and India and Brazil. The people who run our economy may prefer to work, for various reasons, different people, with Britain and America, for example. I mean, is that one of the problems? I mean, that, you know, actually you have to convince business people to trade with the countries you want to trade with.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that what we tend to find is that from our missions, it tends to be a government mission. So you talk about the DTIC and DIRCO getting involved in these, and this information tends to not filter through to the private sector. I mean, if you look at it from Minister Lamula's last engagements yesterday, we can see he talks a bit about, you know, even meat exports and beef exports. And these are really, there is really opportunities there, especially when you look at the UAE and the Middle East for that matter. But it's also very important that people actually look into the detail before they start going out and actually trying to find arrangements. And I'll make an example for you. If we look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and we look at our trade with East Africa, it's actually, we haven't seen much improvement since the launch, but we are definitely seeing a lot of engagements, which I think will lead to something in the near future. But with that said, there are trade barriers that sometimes we have to, as private sector, dig a bit deep to find that information. So a lot of people get shocked when you tell them that you can actually export live animals from South Africa going out into other countries. A lot of people get shocked, but it's something that's happening on a daily basis. It's going by air freight, it's going via road freight, but then you tend to find sea freight gets a lot of resistance, particularly from the SPCA. But the other thing there is that you look at, for example, meat exports, and you've got to look at our foot and mouth disease. So there's a lot of red tape around such engagements. And I'll make an example out of Kenya, which has a big appetite for South African livestock products, but actually you aren't able to export chicken or beef. So the actual meat itself you can't. The live animals you can. but the actual meat and the value added products, so chicken nuggets, etc., we can't. So we know that, you know, KFC, for example, in Kenya has to import a lot of their meat, but South Africa is not an option because of that.
Sure.
And what we tend to find is engagements between governments seem to take long. We know that a delegation was sent from South Africa to try resolve this matter in East Africa, and this was late last year. We are sitting now in November 2024, and we're still waiting for a delegation from Kenya to then come this side, and we can alleviate that. And so Thina, I think if private sector was more aware of these things, we could also maybe, you know, put a bit of pressure to speed up on some of these processes. But the trade barriers still remain.
Okay, Thina, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're going to run out of time very quickly. Donald Trump's going to rewrite the rules of global trade anyway. I mean, your space is going to be very busy for the next 4 years, I suspect.
Yeah. No, it will. But, you know, Stephen, one of the good things is if we look at Donald Trump is not the first time he's the president of the United States of America. And when he was the president the last time, we never saw anything happen with South Africa's membership with AGOA, and our relationships with AGOA have still remained. With the trick with AGOA is that AGOA is one of the trade agreements where the U.S. reserves the right to remove and add members as and when they like. This is why it always seems to be a bit volatile. But to this date, we've never been removed from it. And I think in closing, I think that if you look at the GNU, I think that is something that the administration in the US would actually be behind. So for those reasons, on my side, Stephen, unless something drastic happens that compromises our democracy and our relationships with the US, I don't see us being removed from AGOA. Okay. We remember that I don't see us necessarily being removed particularly. But if something drastic happens that compromises our democracy, or we are shown to really be supporting an opposition to the US and expanding our relationships there to a point where it worries Trump, then we could be removed.
Sure.
But
okay,
on
Thina,
a global scale,
Thina, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thina
Nodada is the Managing Director at Waymaker Trade Solutions. Do apologize for the interruption. More news in a moment.